Alright guys, how are you doing? Hope you're doing well. I don't really touch much upon drug use on my channel, and there are good reasons for that. One, because I don't condone the use of drugs. I don't think drugs are necessarily the way to live one's life. And also because obviously the potential of people becoming addicted to certain substances, especially alcohol or harder drugs. But what I'm going to talk about very briefly in this video is cannabis, or as I like to call it, cannabliss. Because that's essentially what it is. It's a substance that gives you a sense of mental and emotional freedom. It's a substance that can open you up to more self-awareness, to more exposure of the subconscious mind. And I also think that it can bring you a lot of empathy and self-reflection, and obviously a temporary sense of relief, and just a bit of a disconnect from the world, really. Now again, I'm not sitting here condoning people using any kind of substances. But I think if you are going to use any kind of a substance to essentially cope in life, let's call it for what it is, then I think, at least in my opinion, I would say that overall, all things considered, yes, of course, there are side effects and there are potential problems of long-term use, but I would say in general, overall, cannabis is the best of the worst. Ideally, nobody should be using any kind of substances, but we don't live in a perfect world, and we use a lot of substances in our lives anyway, whether we like it or not. Caffeine. How many of us take prescription drugs? How many of us consume vast amounts of sugar and salt every day? And so, of course, like anything, cannabis can be addictive, it can be abused. And I would say that, of course, if you're someone that's prone to abusing things because you have an addictive personality or addictive traits, then I would say, or if you potentially have serious mental health conditions, I would consult with your doctor if it's even legal in your area, whether cannabis is right for you or not. Because there are certainly a lot of benefits from cannabis use. It can help as a pain reliever. It can help you to relax. It can help you to appreciate life a bit more, to have a bit more gratitude. I genuinely believe that there is a case to be made for cannabis. But of course, it requires moderation, it requires people being responsible, people respecting their own minds, cannabis itself. And obviously just being careful, being precautious. This is essentially where microdosing comes in. And this is why I think it's so vastly important that dispensaries or clinics or sort of mental health well-being centres, whether they are established already where you are or we have new generations of them in the coming years or in the coming decades come online, based around the use of psychedelic drugs or psychoactive substances. I think it's vastly important that these things are regulated carefully, obviously legal, and obviously they take care of every individual patient's personal situation with regards to their overall well-being, quality of life. And obviously their overall mental health state. Obviously, if you're someone that's prone to serious mental health problems, whether that be major depressive disorder, bipolar disorder, some types of personality disorders, obviously schizophrenia, then obviously that would be something that you would have to seriously consider with your GP or your doctor, your nurse. I'm not suggesting that cannabis is the only way you can live your life, of course not. I'm not even suggesting that you should take any cannabis. All I'm suggesting is that if you feel that if you want to do that, at the end of the day, it's your life. You can make the decisions for your own happiness or your own sense of well-being, and you should have the right to do that. You should have the right to explore your mind if you want to. But obviously, it comes with risks. It comes with side effects in the short term and the long term. And anybody that's ever used cannabis will tell you. All I know is for sure is that alcohol is a depressant, and it's really a very, very poor drug of choice when it comes to, I think, living a more empathic, more compassionate, more inner, it's more beneficial for you internally than alcohol. Cannabis is far, 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 far better. Cannabis is much more poignant, deep, reflective, analytical, critical. Alcohol is a great drug for socialising or to unwind a little bit. I think if you do it in moderation and you don't go overboard, alcohol is a very useful drug. There's no denying that. There's a reason why it's so popular, because it does have its place. And I don't think anybody would doubt that, really. So that I'm not suggesting that people shouldn't have a life without alcohol. I think it's, unless you want to. Well, it'd be very difficult to go through your entire life without at least some kind of something that can give you a temporary break, a temporary release from your normal default state of mind. And I think I really do believe it's so important that we have opportunities every now and again in life to see things in a different perspective, to experience things in a different way, to give ourselves some time to think about life, think about who we are, and just to look around you and appreciate the small little things. There are good things to be thankful for. There are things to have gratitude for in this world. That doesn't mean that you live in a state of denial about the harshness of reality. But briefly, just for a few hours, you can at least give yourself some time to be able to accept that the reality of the world is harsh and cruel and brutal in many respects. But also, it's also incredibly powerful and beautiful and incredible. And there's a lot to learn. There's a lot to take from it. There's a lot of wisdom to be gained. And overall, I think cannabis can make you much more introspective individual, especially if you're already like that anyway. Then it's going to boost that. But of course, like any drugs, really, it's always about the setting, the context, the people that you're around, or the headspace you're in at the time. And that's why I think it's important that you do, that if you're going to consume, smoke cannabis, then I would recommend that you really go steady and just take your time and work your way into it, and just enjoy, just sit back and relax and unwind and let it wash over you, through you, and don't fight it. Sit back and enjoy it, and take something from the experience of what it's like to be intoxicated by cannabis. I never really liked the word high, and I also don't like the word stoned, because it kind of diminishes it. It devalues the experience. It dilutes what it is. And also, the more you do it, that it kind of has the same outcome, the same kind of feeling. And that's why it's important to balance it out, to lead as relatively as a normal life as you possibly can without it, because then when you have it, you have both extremes. They kind of interact with each other. It's a kind of like it's a yin yang experience, I guess you could say. It's because while you're under the influence of cannabis, the world is still as it is. Nothing's changed as far as the physical world is concerned. But your subjectivity changes. The way that you perceive, or rather the way that your brain perceives sensory input changes. And if nothing else, it's not about whether it's not about what's real or not real. It's just about experiencing something. It doesn't matter whether it's real or not. It's just about just going through the experience. The experience is certainly real. You could say you're certainly in a different state of mind, temporarily. It's not entirely fake. It's, in fact, you could even say that, compared to a lot of drugs, cannabis is perhaps the most grounded in reality. Because the only difference between the survival mechanism or survival state, the default state of the human brain, and cannabis is essentially just that your consciousness is kind of a bit more expanded, I guess, or at least you feel your mind is a bit more flexed, it's a bit more flexible, it's a bit more stretched out, and things feel a lot more vivid. just all senses are more vivid and more amplified. Not distorted necessarily, just amplified. And, when you really think about it anyway, a lot of our life, as we live it for our brains and the construct of the mind, the interplay of those things in the outside world is the concept of subjectivity and what it really means to truly exist, to truly exist in whatever we want to call reality. We interpret the world. We don't necessarily really see reality exactly how it is anyway. And I'm not just sitting here just trying to come up with some sort of pseudo justifications or anything. I just mean that when you really think about it, everyone's got their own perception of the world, their own subjectivity in relationship to whatever's going on. How many times do you spend around your friends or whoever, and you're both watching or you're all looking at something or listening to something, and you have different opinions, different views, different feelings towards things. And essentially cannabis is kind of a bit like that. It's not so much that it's false, it's just different. It's a different angle. And because you're more relaxed, you're less, your brain's a bit more kind of relaxed, I guess. It feels a bit more less rigid, less stressed out, and just more of a kind of lullaby, more of a kind of, more alertness, I guess, a more vivid experience, a more vivid subjective experience, let's call it. I believe there is a place for cannabis in people's lives if they reach a stage in life where they're when people reach a stage in life where they start going through that existential period, phase, era. And for some people that can last a relatively short period of time. It's just a small bout in which you kind of have some doubts. But then there sometimes comes a point in one's life where you start to question everything around you. You start to ponder on big philosophical, big scientific questions, big cosmology questions. The fabric of reality itself. And I think cannabis kind of lends itself to that. It lends itself to wanting to think. It's a thinking, I would say in many ways it's a thinking man's drug or a thinking woman's drug. I guess you could say it's the philosopher's drug of choice, perhaps. If there is such a thing. And I am by no means a philosopher, the way I see myself, but some people might say that I'm a bit of a philosopher, or at least have a bit of a philosophical mind. I don't know how I became like this, really. It just kind of evolved naturally. And I remember very vividly being told in, I think it was 05 or 06 time by some of the people in the youth group that I was in at the time, we all had to write one word to describe it. I've mentioned this before, but we all had to, everyone had their names on this piece of paper, we all had to write one word that we felt represented that person, and on mine it said deep thinker. And it's just always stuck with me. It's always, I don't know whether I kind of it became a self-fulfilling thing in terms of or maybe it was just, I don't know, maybe it was just, that's naturally how I am. Yeah, I guess I've kind of always been like this, really. I was like it as a kid. I was always kind of pondering, looking out there, wondering, not to the extent I do now, but just more. It was just more of a feeling back then, rather than uh, articulated thoughts or anything. I wasn't really like that back then. I just remember I used to look out the window a lot at school, and I guess I've always kind of been a bit of a daydreamer, and maybe head in the clouds type person, perhaps, or perhaps too idealistic. But I didn't really choose to be like this way, as far as I can tell. I just kind of naturally fell into it. I remember I was always fascinated by the brain as a kid. I was always drawn to certain sounds and certain vibes and just how things felt, the sort of energy around me. And I was just always kind of in my own little world, really. And I've kind of felt like I've always been like that, just living in my own little tunnel of, I don't know what you would call it, just a kind of state of disconnect, maybe disassociating or something like that. Now, whether that makes me mentally ill or crazy, I don't know, but or did. It doesn't matter really, but I was always longing for freedom as a kid. I remember that very much when I was at primary school. I always wanted to get out. I was always really. I just never liked being at school. I never liked being in the classroom. I never really enjoyed it. I just always wanted to get out there and be in the playground or go down the bike path. And when I was at second school, we had an old train track that was turned into a cycle path that ran past our school, the back end of the school. I was always fascinated by the things that were going on outside the school rather than in the school. I don't think I was ever really truly present a lot of the time at school, looking back on it. I was more interested in and engaged in the things that had nothing to do with school. Whether it was because where my primary school was, for example, it was right right on the edge of the city, literally on the boundary, and sometimes you could hear the tractors of farm machinery because the field was literally right behind our primary school. There was a farm right behind it, and it was just literally just countryside for miles upon miles upon miles, until literally you get to, I think I don't know how many kilometers it was, but it must have been a good, the nearest major place to my city was a good, as far as going north or going east or northeast was it was like the coast, really, and that was probably a good 30 kilometers away or something, maybe a bit less. So there wasn't, between my primary school, both, really, even my secondary school, really. My primary school had the countryside right behind the gates, right behind the tree line of the playing field, and at my secondary school, we had the factories, factories, and there was this massive caravan area, this caravan park. I don't know if it was I don't know if it was just a sales place or a manufacturing place. I'm not sure, but I always remember certain because you could, and it's weird because you could see tractors there as well, and because I think it must have been a manufacturer. I don't know if I can't remember off the top of my head, but they had little tractors in the yard and used to hit there was all old Massey Fergusons and things like that, and I always remember the sounds of them and the smells, because you could from that, even from my secondary school, you could still smell things from miles away. We have this area in my city called Wincolmley. It's basically an industrial area, and I think it's gone now, but there used to be like I can't remember exactly what it was, but it was some kind of a factory, and it had this tall chimney on it. I think it might have been, I don't know, I'm not really sure. I don't know if it was cement or something. I can't remember now, but there was some kind of factory in it, and it had this very distinct smell, and you could smell it on a good day if it was the weather was right, you had the right conditions, and you could just smell it. And anyway, I know there's conversations about cannabis, but like, I just wanted to kind of say this because I think it leans in part into why I like cannabis and why it's something that I personally enjoy partaking in. But from being at primary school, being at secondary school, I was always fascinated by. Just growing up where I grew up was pretty interesting because it was a port city. You could sometimes hear the big ferries because you can go to Amsterdam, you can go to Rotterdam from my city. So sometimes you could hear the ships in the morning. You'd smell like certain things from the farm, the countryside. If it was at a primary school, if you went, sometimes you could hear like sirens and things going off in nearby like factories or whatever. And I was just always fascinated by that. I was always longing to find out what was going on outside the school. I was always interested in. I don't know. I was on my own little ambience. I think it's hard to explain, but like I was just really caught up in my own little world of my own little energy world, my own little vibe, my own little ambience, and I didn't want it to be disturbed. And I felt that by being at school, it was like disturbing the force of it or something. I don't know. As wicked as it is to say that, but yeah, it was just. I never really enjoyed school. I think I've just kind of always been a little bit anti-authoritarian, really, just anti-authority in general. I don't know where that comes from exactly, but I just never really liked being told what to do at school or anywhere, really. I've never really enjoyed, like, I don't know if anybody really does, but I certainly didn't like it. And I was just always trying to look for some reason to get out of the class. Especially when I was at secondary school, I was always being back chatting the teachers and just kind of being a bit of an obnoxious prick at times, I guess. But because I never enjoyed being at school, it's like I enjoyed it to the extent of like my friends were there and we got to play out. I was always looking forward to something at school. Like I was always looking forward to lunch. I was always looking forward to getting out the door. I couldn't wait to go in. I don't always remember just how long classes used to take. It was just to take forever. It seemed like forever. And so anytime like the fire alarm went off, like it was a relief because everyone would have to go out to school. I remember we all had to line up and wait for the siren to end. And that was the same at secondary school. I haven't thought about that stuff in a while, but yeah, it was special, a very special time in my life, the 90s, the 90s. I've made enough videos about it on my channel already, but I really mean it. It really was very, very special time. In many, many respects. There was just a much different vibe about the world. It was more of it felt more relaxed. It felt more secure in itself, I guess you might say. I don't know, maybe that's the difference now. It's like, it just feels like now that everything's kind of just become too unstable and everyone seems insecure now. But anyway, the reason I wanted to bring that stuff up there is just that I've always had this kind of a bit of a sort of like high-like vibe about me anywhere. I've always kind of had this very my head is somewhere else. I've always had that. And I didn't choose to be. But I think when I started to smoked cannabis for the very first time when I was 22 years old, at first it was a bit daunting, and as I was saying earlier about side effects, anxiety and racing thoughts and things, they can be unpleasant. I will admit that. But when it's right, it's right. When you've got that little sweet spot, there's nothing better in the world than that, I don't think. There is no better experience when you find that little sweet spot. And everything just feels like, finally. It's almost like returning home to something. It's like coming home and there's a nice hot plate of something on the table, or it's like sitting by the fireside during winter. It's like sitting out on your porch and looking out, and the sky looks nice. The grass is all cut. There's leaves on the grass. Just something like that. It's that kind of feel to it. And I think everybody should have the opportunity to experience that. Because that's something special. That experience is special. There's so much we can gain from being much more self-aware, being much more honest with ourselves. Being a little bit more carefree in some ways. We're too caught up in this world now. We're too busy all the time. As soon as you wake up in the morning to the moment you go to sleep, how much news is being broadcast around the world, just how much trade and business and market activities going on, even when you're sleeping, but at least you're not aware of it, And I think cannabis gives you a sense that you just kind of, it's there, but you just kind of it's not that's more in the peripheral, Cannabis gives you this ability to kind of put things into the peripheral, I guess. You're not ignoring them. You're aware of it, but they're not they're not blocking everything in front of you. It's like compartmentalizing things for a period of time, not shutting them out. You're still aware that what is whatever is. But it's nice to just have that relief, that bit of alone time, that bit of a time for you, a bit of solitude. It's like getting into a nice, lovely, warm, cozy bath, and just it's the right, perfect temperature. The room's at the right temperature. You've got a little window open just to let the air out. Let air in as well. And it's just like maybe you've got the radio quietly playing on in the background. It's just a really relaxing headspace. And I think we need that. I think as time's going by, I'm realizing we need more of that in this world. We need to just relax. Just relax, man. It's not that serious. It's not that important. I'm not saying we just stop the global economy. Of course not. But I do think that we have to start. Looking deeper at this point, I think. I really do. I think we are at a crisis point in time with our planet, with technology, with the potential of political unrest, global unrest because of climate change, immigration change affecting the world, changes that affecting different nations around the world. Because I just think we're not living anymore. We're not living anymore. We're just experiencing all of the things around us, but we're not paying attention to ourselves. We're spending more time distracted and caring about other things that have nothing to do with us, rather than working on who we are and trying to find ways to improve, to think more carefully and deeper, and come to a place that maybe we can all agree on. Maybe there's some point in which all of humanity can some way come together and work a way forward that's better than we currently have. That's what I want for the world. When I'm dead and buried, I hope the world is in a much better place. Whether that's tomorrow, 10, 20 years down the line, 50 years down the line, I don't know. But, I want this world to be a better place. And speaking of, death, cannabis is something that does help you to confront it, and almost, kind of makes you kind of accept it, not quite fear it as much anymore. As of course, nobody wants to die anytime soon, but we all know that point is going to happen to us at some point. And I think that if nothing else, cannabis should be something that I think should, in my opinion, should be used under very specific circumstances through microdosing to help people with serious problems, serious fears, serious insecurities. Because I think it can help. Because if you can get somebody to think about their life, then you're more likely to help them to change it. The more you tell somebody to do something, the less likely they are to do it. Cannabis kind of forces you sometimes, and it can be uncomfortable, to come to terms with darker parts of your mind, darker memories and traumas and suppressed feelings and emotional unresolved situations in life, and grief and bereavement, loss of various kinds. There is a space, I think, in this world for use for legal use of cannabis, whether that's in its smokable form or whether you want to use edibles. That's your choice, I would guess. But I think if you are going to use cannabis, I would say the best thing you can do is to the best thing to do is to just let it just don't fight against it. The more you fight against cannabis, the worse it will get. So it's a very important thing. And I think you have to do it correctly. You have to do things right. And I think you do have to be careful. Of course, you have to be able to moderate yourself. You have to be able to respect your body, respect your mind, and everything will be okay. I think the more that you fight against it, the less you I think in the end, the best thing you can do is to try not to fight against things too much. The more you fight against things, the longer it will be to recover. And I think in some ways, like I said, cannabis is one of those things that can really help you along in life. But I would say that it's important to do things in moderation and to be very careful of your mind. Overall, it's important that you just be precautious, just be careful, and I think it's, in the end, the best thing you can do is just to work out what you want in life. Work out how you want to get there, what you want to do, and eventually you'll be okay. It's very, one of the last things you want to do is to lose control of yourself. That's the, whether that's because of drugs or just without them. Sometimes for some people I would say it's better to not have drugs, to stay away from them. I think in the end you have to decide that, there's a point where I think you say, okay, enough is enough now, and you walk away. I'm not suggesting that anyone should live their entire lives through the use of drugs, of course not. But I think it's definitely important that you I definitely think it's important that you just do things in moderation, do things carefully. And I think you'd be okay, really. But again, it's down to you. It's on you to sort your life out. I can't help you. I can only offer my advice and what I think might help. But in the end, I don't know. I don't know what is good for you or what isn't good for you. You can only do that for yourself. So I would say in the end, just be careful. Be very careful with your own mind, with your own life overall, and you do what you feel is right for you. And you should be okay. Don't really know what else to say, to be honest, so I think I'm going to leave it there for now. And I'll catch you on another one soon. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.